Heavens are smiling upon us, and here you are at the depot for another 4th of July celebration. And this year we're going to start off with a kind of a bigger chunk of music than we've done in the past, and I've tried to link our songs to the theme of the presentation you're going to see about people's attitudes toward what was going on in the country. And in the 1760s, a song became very popular in the American colonies, spreading from town to town, mostly just by being sung, as music notation was scarce. It was called "Come Here, Fellow Servant," and it was the only song in a play that was held in London in 1759 by James Townley, and the play was called High Life Below Stairs, and it was about a master pretending to be a servant to spy on his employees. And it was not a musical. There was only one song in the play, and this was it. But it became very popular in the colonies because its message is one of essential equality. It says we are all in a livery, all wearing servants' clothing, and thus all serving something or someone, no matter how free we think we may be. And its lyrics are quite a departure from the prevailing message of the time, which was to know your place in the hierarchy of life and stay there. Thank you very much. And it even advocates for hitting the open road, a novel idea that became a part of the national character. And it doesn't hurt that it's a tankard waver, so sing along as you get the words as they go by, all in a livery. Come here, fellow servant. Yes, one of the verses says, nature made all alike, no distinction she craves. What is that happening in 1750 whatever? Well, these sentiments show the spread of new ideas about the meaning of liberty. For the ruling class, gentlemen farmers like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, only those whose education and social status suited them for liberty deserved to be free. Everyone else, women, children, servants, slaves, were to focus on obeying their betters, white landowning men, and remaining content in the place where God had so obviously decided they belonged. That was the way the world ran back then. And in the years leading up to the revolution, this old order was being questioned. Now, despite increasing friction, many colonists kept trying to resolve conflicts with the mother country. They felt their argument was not with the king, but with Parliament's refusal to grant them any say in how they were governed and taxed. In 1768, John Dickinson set some lyrics to one of England's proudest naval anthems, Heart of Oak. He called it the Liberty Song. And the chorus swears that colonists are ready to open their purses, but only as free men, not as slaves. Now, the jarring use of the word slaves makes us uncomfortable, but at this time it was commonly used to describe anyone who did not have control over their lives. In many romantic songs, lovers declare they are a slave to passion, unable to think straight. Dickinson even drinks a health to King George, hoping that he will take the colonists' side. So here is a little fascinating song from 1768 called the Liberty Song. Well, a few years later, in 1770, another colonist borrowed the melody of a venerable British military song to make a political point. Dr. Joseph Warren was head of the Committee of Safety, which sent Revere and Dawes on their fateful ride. He wrote 9 verses, even though he was more a doctor than a songwriter, and most people start with the 4th one that he wrote, so obviously should be the first. And he declares that the colonies should and will be free and independent. It's called Free America. He even predicts that our warships, of which we had none when he wrote his verses, will someday overpower those of England, France, and Spain. And Warren chose for his music the British Grenadiers, one of Britain's proudest marching songs, and that definitely added a thumb of the nose to the Brits who heard it. So here's Free America from 1770.
Lift out your hands, ye heroes, and swear with proud disdain. The wretch that would ensnare you shall spread his net in vain. Should Europe empty all her force, we'll meet them in array, and fight and shout and fight for free America. We left their freedom hither and lo, the desert smile. A paradise of pleasure was opened in the wild. Your harvest, those Americans, will come and snatch away. Preserve, preserve, preserve your rights in a free America. Torn from a world of tyrants beneath this western sky, we formed a new dominion, a land of liberty. The world shall home with freedom here, and such will ever be. Huzzah, 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 huzzah for free America. Some future day shall crown us the masters of the main. Our fleet shall speak in thunder to England, France, and Spain. The nations o'er the ocean spread shall tremble and obey the prince who rules by freedom's laws in North America.
Thank you. And of course, in 1770, Warren had no idea we would have something called a president. So he looks ahead through the mists of time and says, we'll have a prince who rules by freedom's laws in North America. Well, next we have an old song from England, which was part of a mummers play in Simonsbury for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And it was popular in the colonies because most of our music came from the British Isles, England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, etc. And it has a theme similar to our first song, Come Here, Fellow Servant. A gentleman tries to hire a farmer, a husbandman, as he calls him. There are wives and husbandmen who husband their resources carefully. He wants him to be his servant, and he promises him fine food and clothing, but the farmer declares that he will remain independent and his own man. Thank you very much. I'm not sure why this is called Singing the Travels, but that's been its name since God knows when, so we're not going to change it now. So here's Singing the Travels. And we get a wonderful glimpse into what people thought was luxurious food. They're going to dine on cock and goose and capon and swan. Oh, kind of sad. Yes. And when they have cocked hats on, those are hats whose edges are turned up, just like our menfolk here have their cocked hats.
Well met, my brother dear, all along the highway ride. The solemn man was walking along. Oh, pray come tell to me what calling yours may be, and I'll have you for
Well, next we have an allegory. If you remember this from your English class, that's where figures stand in for other figures. And in 1773, after the Boston Tea Party, lyrics appeared in the newspapers about an old lady who lives across the ocean, that would be England, and her bouncing young daughter who lives on these shores. And the lady is demanding obedience from her daughter, because as we know, obedience is the first duty of all children to their parents at all. Are there any children? No, never mind. They haven't heard it yet. And this is definitely made for singing along, because the last line of each verse gets repeated conveniently. So help us out on a revolutionary tea.
There was an old lady lived over the sea, and she was an island queen. Her daughter lived off in a new country, with an ocean of water between. With an ocean of water between. The old lady's pockets were filled with gold, but never contented was she.
We have one more song for you. From 1775, we're right on the brink of the events we're about to hear about. And this song was written by E. Russell. I've not managed to scope out what his first name was. Could have been anything. Elijah, Edmund, Ezekiel, Earl, who knows. Anyway, he used yet another well-loved British melody for verses advocating rebellion. When people wrote political songs at this time, they usually didn't bother to write new music. They just picked one of the many, many melodies that people already were familiar with. And it was so hard to write down notes, whereas you could put lyrics in a newspaper or a pamphlet or on a piece of paper, and people could just do it to the tune. And by doing this to, British songs, it added that wonderful extra kick. Well, this song stresses that, he changed the song called Britons to Arms to Americans to Arms, stressing the fact that many colonists had a new identity and no longer considered themselves British. And the tagline says, "Farewell, England." It bids farewell to the mother country and rallies soldiers to fight to form a new nation. And it completely understands the cost involved in going to war and that people will lose their lives in pursuit of liberty. So here we have Americans to Arms.
America's sons, yourselves prepare, for liberty now calls for war. Exert yourselves with force and might, show how Americans can fight, but only to maintain their right. Rouse, rouse, my boys, hear freedom call. Mount your guns, prepare your ball. The fight will conquer or will die, but we'll maintain our liberty and hand it to posterity. Hark from afar the trumpet sounds. See your old heroes' blood and wounds. Drums of beating colors fly. Cannons roar and brave men die. Start the bold Americans. Farewell, America, which rules the land, her valiant sons join hand in hand. United sons of freedom may drive all those dogs of war away. With triumph crown America, why then should we be daunted at all, since we're engaged in so noble a call, as fighting for our church and laws, and dying in so just a cause, will prove the fatal overthrow.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. We are the Lexington Historical Society Colonial Singers. This is some of us. There are more of us. And we made a CD back in 2015, and we have some copies in the back there. It has Come Here, Fellow Servant, and some songs like that on it. And we just finished a second one. We raised money for it 2.5 years ago, and we just finished it. So it should be out in about a month, I would say, or thereabouts. So I guess we're ready to move on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So thank you. One more hand for Diane Tavares and the Lexington Historical Society Colonial Singers. Thank you so much. So, good evening, everyone. I'm Sue Rockwell. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Lexington Historical Society, and it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight on behalf of the Lexington Historical Society and of Freedom's Way National Heritage Area. Now, some of you may not have heard about that. Freedom's Way National Heritage Area works in partnership with the National Park Service, and particularly with the Minuteman National Park, our neighbor to the west. The area includes 45 communities in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. It connects the people, places, and communities of the heritage area through preservation, conservation, and educational initiatives that protect and promote the natural, historic, and cultural resources of the region. They developed the script that we will be using this evening for the core part of our program. Now, most of you probably know about the Lexington Historical Society, but for the 2 or 3 of you that don't, we're responsible for the stewardship and promotion of Lexington's history through our extensive archives, programming for all age groups, and our 3 major historic sites, the Buckman Tavern, Hancock Clark House, and Monroe Tavern. Now, we're not just all about the Revolution, despite the fact of all that stuff that happens in April and tonight's program. We are concerned with Lexington's history throughout time, including the fact that we are the birthplace of mid-century modernism. Now, if you're not already a member, you should be, and you should consider it. Our members get free admission to all our historic sites, priority notice and pricing for many of our programs, and a discount at our museum shop. More information is available at the table to the rear of the room, and you may also make a donation if you'd like. We're always very grateful for all donations, but particularly now as we are raising funds to do a complete renovation of this space that you're in. It's very exciting. In fact, we have some information at the back about what it's going to look like when we're done. In the meantime, we have a program tonight. It is my pleasure to introduce the stars of the heart of our program, Declaring Independence Then and Now. Our distinguished new narrator this year is Jay Kaufman. He is Lexington's former state representative for 24 years, and he always adds that he proudly served in that capacity. While at the State House, he noticed there was considerable room for improvement in our government. So he is now writing and teaching about leadership in the public square, primarily through his founding of the nonprofit Beacon Leadership Collaborative, which offers workshops, coaching, and mentoring to those serving in or aspiring to public life. And he notes he's a happy and lucky husband, father, grandfather, and Lexingtonian. Jay Kaufman. Speaker number 1 is Craig Sandler, first Vice President of the Lexington Historical Society and Managing Partner of State House News, speaking of the State House. Speaker number 2 is Jamie Lee, member of the Lexington Company of Minutemen and husband of our Society's current president, Ann Lee, who's watching from the back to make sure he doesn't mess up.
Pressure.
Speaker number 3 is Sarah McDonough, who is our Society's program manager and one of our top historic house docents. Speaker number 4 is Michael Duncan Smith, also a member of the Lexington Minuteman Company and expert 18th century field cook. Speaker number 5 is Marcia Baker, a member of the Society's Board of Directors, chair of our Interpretations Committee, a top docent at our historic sites, and whatever else we need to have done. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will proceed with our program, Declaring Independence Then and Now. Jay?
Declaration of Independence is revolutionary still. It was in 1776 and remains so today. as it boldly professes what is and what could be. The Declaration announced the birth of a nation, one governed for and by the people, in order to secure liberty, equality, and justice for all. For 246 years, we have engaged in the struggle to redeem these revolutionary promises. Today, the Declaration remains a remarkable document of what we as a nation must continually strive to become. Many played a part in birthing the Declaration. In the spring of '76, when the Continental Congress considered independence from Great Britain, it wanted assurances that each colony would support their risky endeavor. The colonies responded with the language of independence, language they had heard over the previous 10 years of popular protest. In Massachusetts, John Adams and the legislature put the matter directly to the towns.
Essex Journal, May 18, 1776. Resolved, as to the opinion of this House, that the inhabitants of each town in this colony ought, in full meeting, advise whether that if the Honorable Congress should, for the safety of the said colonies, declare them independent of the Kingdom of Great Britain, they, the said inhabitants, will solemnly engage with their lives and fortunes to support them in this measure.
Across Massachusetts, people gathered in town meetings to debate the question. Each knew the meaning of engaging with their lives and their fortunes. If they tried and failed to separate from Britain, they would face the penalties of treason, their property seized, their lives forfeited. Today, the results of their debates and votes survive in town meeting record books. Some towns simply affirmed their support, others drafted full-fledged town declarations of independence. And some, like Barnstable, whose coastline lay exposed to the world's most powerful navy, voted not to seek independence. Let us recover the words of these people of Massachusetts of 1776.
Lexington Town Meeting, Thursday, May 23rd, 1776. The town met, voted to refer the important matter relating to the independency of the colonies to the Honorable Continental Congress and strictly adhere to their resolutions and declarations about that momentous affair. And that if the said Congress should, for the safety of the colonies, declare them independent of the Kingdom of Great Britain, we stand ready with our lives and fortunes to support them in the measures.
Lunenburg Town Meeting, May 24th, 1776. Voted that if the Honorable Congress should, for the safety of these united colonies, declare them independent of the Kingdom of Great Britain, that the said inhabitants do solemnly engage with their lives and fortunes to support themselves in the measure. Vote was put to a full meeting without one sentinel.
Westford Town Meeting, June 14th, 1776. It is our humble opinion that nothing short of a state of independency will so well answer for our safety, and, in case the said Congress should declare a state of independency, we will acquiesce thereto and risk our lives and fortunes in support thereof.
In the town of Warwick, where the minister preached strenuously against independence, the town voted by yeas and nays. 38 names voted yea, and 44 more came in within 6 days and voted for independence, making a total of 82 yeas and not one in the negative.
Sudbury Town Meeting, June 10th, 1776. The present unhappy situation of our public affairs by reason of the arbitrary and oppressive measures taken against us in the American colonies by the King and Parliament of Great Britain, and all hopes of an accommodation, seems to be finally at an end. We therefore give the strongest assurance that it is not only the unanimous but the hearty and sincere intention of your constituents that should the Honorable Continental Congress, for the safety of these colonies, declare them independent of Great Britain, they will, at the risk of their all, support them in the measures.
Acted June 14th, 1776, at a general town meeting. the subverting of our Constitution, the many injuries unheard of barbarities which these colonies have received from Great Britain confirms us in the opinion that the present age will be deficient in our duty to God, their posterity, and themselves if they do not establish an American republic. We give them the strongest assurance that if they should declare America to be a free and independent republic, your constituents will support and defend the measure with their lives and fortune.
In Sudbury and Acton's responses, we see more than mere assent. In asserting their rights and grievances, they were following a model. The British people had a long tradition of respecting lawful authority. If a ruler was to be ousted and a new government instituted, the reasons must be properly declared. The Declaration of Rights in 1689, when the British deposed the Catholic James II and crowned his Protestant daughter Mary and her husband William, was a model for altering or abolishing government. A declaration should include several elements. It should announce an important change in government. It should lay out the people's rights and show how those rights have been violated. It should declare that as a result of these violations, the ruler had broken his contract with the people and abdicated his authority. And finally, it should announce the creation of a new government.
Malden, a Declaration of Independence, May 17th, 1776. It is the ardent wish of our souls that America may become a free and independent state. A sense of unprovoked injuries will arouse the resentment of the most peaceful. Such injuries these colonies have received from Britain. Unjustifiable claims have been made by the king and his minions to tax us without our consent. These claims have been prosecuted in a manner cruel and unjust to the highest degree. They send fleets and armies to America, that by depriving us of our trade and cutting the throats of our brethren, they might awe us into submission and erect a system of despotism in America, which should so far enlarge the influence of the crown as to enable it to rivet their shackles upon the people of Great Britain. For these reasons, we are confirmed in the opinion that the present age will be deficient in their duty to God, their posterity, and themselves if they do not establish an American republic.
More than 3/4 of Massachusetts towns drafted statements on independency that spring, almost all of them positive. Crafting, debating, and voting on those statements solidified support and mobilized towns. It primed the people for the Declaration of Independence. When the Continental Congress ultimately declared independence, word traveled fast. By July 14th, an express rider carrying the Declaration reached Worcester, where Isaiah Thomas waylaid him. The activist printer took the document to the steps of the meeting house and proclaimed it to the assembled crowds before allowing the rider to carry it to Boston. This marked the first time those memorable words were heard in Massachusetts. Public celebrations ensued.
Massachusetts Spy, Worcester, July 24th. On Monday last, a number of patriotic gentlemen of this town assembled on the green near the Liberty Pole, where the bells were set a-ringing and drums a-beating. After which, the Declaration of Independency of the United States was read by a large and respectable body who testified their approbations by repeated huzzas, firing of musketry and cannon, bonfires, and other demonstrations of joy. The sons of freedom repaired to the tavern where toasts were drunk, including perpetual itching without the benefit of scratching to the enemies of America. Huzzah!
In Boston, one of the Sons of Liberty read the Declaration from the old State House balcony to jubilant crowds below. Then the legislature ordered the document to be proclaimed in every village and town.
In Council, July 17th, 1776, ordered that the Declaration of Independence be printed and a copy sent to the ministers of each parish within the state, and that they be required to read the same to their respective congregations. and to deliver it to the clerks of the town, who are thereby required to record the same in their town books, there to remain a perpetual memorial thereof.
When they heard the declaration proclaimed in their towns in July of 1776, the people recognized the words as their own. The grievances expressed as trials they had experienced, the liberties asserted as their birthright. Hear that declaration now, as it was heard proclaimed to Massachusetts townfolks 246 years ago. The declaration begins by announcing a great change in government. The reasons for this change must be clearly set forth for all, colonists, British, and the whole world to understand.
In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
Then, in a most memorable passage, the Declaration asserts the equality and universal right to liberty of all people and the responsibility of government to ensure these rights. Everything else in the Declaration flows from these extraordinary claims.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to those ends, it is the rights of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
The Declaration then professes the colonists' respect for established laws. However, those laws have been so repeatedly violated that to continue under current government would amount to surrendering to tyranny.
Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government.
The longest portion of the Declaration details the people's grievances, for it is these grievances that justify the overthrow of authority. This train of abuses that the king has repeatedly and purposely harmed his colonists is proof that he has become a tyrant and is no longer fit to be the guardian of their liberty and equality.
The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
We then hear 29 general grievances against King, Parliament, and the British people. They begin with actions taken by the king to obstruct, delay, and negate colonial government, undermining the sovereignty of the people.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them.
They protest that the king, fearing large legislative bodies, had refused to allocate representatives to the growing frontier, denying settlers their rightful voice in government.
He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
They protest punitive acts by king and parliament that hampered the meetings and business of colonial legislatures, again denying the people their rightful participation in government.
He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such disillusions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasions from without and convulsions within.
All of these grievances point to one end. The king was obstructing the rule of law in order to silence the voice and will of the people. The list of grievances continued. The king had banned settlement of the Ohio River Valley, limiting westward migration of the colonists and, in their minds, the rights to secure their subsistence on new lands. He was thus obstructing and denying their pursuit of happiness.
He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states. For that purpose, obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriation of lands.
The king interfered with American courts of justice and diverted them from established rule of law and the pursuit of the common good.
He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries.
The king appointed despised tax collectors and customs agents to police American trade and to injure the economic well-being of the people.
He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance.
He had sent his army to harass and intimidate them.
He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power.
He allowed Parliament to impose laws upon the colonists, though the colonists had no representatives in Parliament, that undermined the sovereignty of the people in their colonial legislatures.
He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation.
Parliament punished their protests with a series of intolerable acts that violated their treasured rights as British citizens.
For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial, from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury, and for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses.
Parliament allowed French law and Catholic religion to persist in Quebec after it became an English colony. This and other acts the colonists believed threatened their prize English constitutional law and Protestant religion.
For abolishing the free system of English law in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies.
Perhaps most grievously, the colonies believed that king and parliament together conspired to strip them of their prized right of self-government. Constitutions were voided, laws abolished, even town meetings were banned.
For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever.
By these abuses, the king had abandoned his role as their sovereign protector. He had become their enemy, at war with his own people.
He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is, at this time, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation.
In that war, they asserted the king was impressing American sailors into the British Navy and inciting Native Americans to attack the frontiers.
He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions.
The king ignored all appeals for justice. Therefore, he forfeited his place as a ruler and left them a people ungoverned.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
The British people, too, once held in warm brotherly affection, abandoned them to the abuses of king and parliament. In grief, the colonists must separate from their ancestral kin.
Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connection and our correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must, therefore, acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends.
Being then without a governor or government, it is necessary for these colonies to establish a new government with all the powers of governments among the nations of the world.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name of authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all the other acts and things which independent states may of right do.
And finally, the peoples declare that to this new government they pledge their all, including all that will be lost if their cause fails, their lives, their property, and their honor among descendants.
And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
These words were proclaimed from pulpits, printed in broadsides, toasted in taverns. They responded to deeply felt grievances. They professed deeply held rights. They inspired people to risk their all to create a new nation, a nation dedicated to liberty and equality. For 246 years, we have wrestled with fulfilling the Declaration's promise of liberty and equality. The challenges are with us still: to secure liberty, to ensure equality before the law, to provide the means for all to pursue their full potential and their happiness. The Declaration is a living document, and it draws its vitality from each generation's pursuit of liberty and equality. We have contested: does liberty apply to enslaved people? Equality to women? What are the rights of immigrants? Is equal justice ensured across races, across religious creeds? Do all have an equal voice and equal power of representation? What does equality mean in a society divided by class and wealth? Does poverty jeopardize liberty? Does liberty imply essential rights to health, education, and welfare? Under what conditions do we forfeit the promised rights of liberty and equality? When our government falls short of ensuring liberty and equality, what redress do we have for our grievances, and how do we exercise that? We are heirs of this obligation to redeem the promises of the Declaration of Independence. How are we doing? How are we doing?
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was great. Now, here in 1776, we all know that there's not much that goes on in the area that the king is not aware of. So we were encouraged to invite one of their representatives this evening. And he insists, he would like to make a few remarks. Major General William Howe.
Oh, it's you, Howe.
I love you all too. I bring with me tonight a proclamation. Now, I know you've had other proclamations, but I'm thinking one more will just do it and really, really settle the matter. This one's good. Shh. Quiet. By William Howe, me, Esquire, General of His Majesty's Forces in America, and the King's Commissioner for restoring peace to His Majesty's colonies, Remember that word? Colonies, yes.
Long how?
Restoring peace to His Majesty's colonies and provinces in North America, a proclamation. Whereas, in pursuance of His Majesty's most gracious intentions towards his subjects in the colonies or provinces of New Hampshire to Georgia inclusive, all persons speedily returning to their just allegiance are promised a free and general pardon, and are invited to accept not only the blessings of peace, but a secure enjoyment of their rights, liberties, and properties upon the true principles of the Constitution. Take his name, would you? Several bodies of armed men, in open contempt of His Majesty's proffered clemency, do continue their opposition to the reestablishment of legal government and peace. Diverse other ill-disposed persons. I'm looking at you, yes. Ill-disposed persons and assemblies endeavor by various arts, misrepresentations, fallacious rumors, pamphlets, and declarations to alienate the confidence and affection of His Majesty's subjects, defeat every plan of reconciliation, and to prolong the unnatural war between Great Britain and her colonies. Now, to the more effectual accomplishment of His Majesty's most gracious intentions, and the speedy restoration of public tranquility, we do in His Majesty's name charge and command all persons who are assembled together in arms against His Majesty's government to disband themselves and return to their dwellings, there to remain in a peaceable and quiet manner.
Oh, close your potato trap.
We also charge and command all persons who are assembled together under the name of general or provincial congresses, committees, or conventions who take upon them to issue or execute orders for levying money, raising troops, or otherwise molesting His Majesty's subjects to cease and desist from all such treasonable acts and to relinquish all such usurped authority so that peace may be restored and the inhabitants of the said colonies be enabled to reap the benefit of His Majesty's paternal goodness in the preservation of their property, the restoration of their commerce, and the security. Pardon? And the security of their most valuable rights under the just and moderate authority of the Crown and Parliament of Great Britain. Is there a leak somewhere? We further declare and make known to every person those who shall appear before any officer commanding His Majesty's forces in America and shall claim benefit of this proclamation and testify his obedience to the laws shall obtain a full and free pardon of all treasons and offenses heretofore committed against His Majesty's crown and dignity. Now that's quite reasonable, isn't it? And of all forfeitures, attainders, and penalties for the same. And lastly, that all persons bearing arms aforesaid, who shall come in with his arms, shall receive the full value for them.
We trust you not.
It's a buyback program. The rebellious war now levied is manifestly carried on for the purpose of establishing an independent empire. We need not dwell upon the fatal effects of such a plan. The object is too important, the spirit of the British nation too high, the resources with which God hath blessed her too numerous to give up so many colonies which she has planted with great industry, nursed with great tenderness, encouraged with many commercial advantages, and protected and defended at much expense of blood and treasure.
Ooh, stuff.
When the unhappy and deluded multitude,
Hey now.
that's you, shall become sensible of their error, we shall be ready to receive the misled with tenderness and mercy, and to receive the submission of any province or colony which shall be disposed to return to its allegiance as if such province or colony had never revolted. Given this day at New York, by command of His Excellency William Howe, God save His Majesty the King!
Ooh, to perdition, to perdition.
Shall we take a vote?
We do.
You're incredibly tiresome.
Okay. As we prepare for our finale, I just want to take one more moment to thank our readers and our narrator. And yes, our favorite redcoat, Paul O'Shaughnessy.
O'Shaughnessy!
So, now it's time to end our program as we traditionally do with the colonial singers leading us in God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Huzzah!
Thank you, everyone, and good evening.
Ride to Abbott's.